Madam President, I come to the floor again to discuss two U.S. Attorney nominations which have been on the calendar for weeks. Rebecca Lutzko, nominated to be U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Ohio, and April Perry, nominated to serve as U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois. On several previous occasions, I've had to come to the floor to request unanimous consent for the Senate to take up these non-controversial, bipartisan nominations and confirm these law enforcement nominees. Each time I've come to the floor asking for this, the junior senator from Ohio has objected. He says that he ran for office to fight the criminals and not the cops. It turns out to be a hollow promise when he's holding up criminal prosecutors at a professional level in two major parts of the United States, one of them his own state. Our communities desperately need top federal prosecutors in place. Interested in stopping fentanyl? I am. Thousands of people are dying. Well, who's going to prosecute those cases? The U.S. attorneys, 93 of them across the United States. But you can't prosecute the case if you don't have the U.S. attorney there to lead the effort, coordinate the effort with other branches of government. You can have an interim in there, and I'm sure that person will do as good a job as they can, but it isn't like the permanent person that you need as U.S. attorney. Here we have two that have been chosen by the junior senator from Ohio to stop, one from his own state. U.S. attorneys lead the nation's efforts to prosecute violent criminals and protect our communities from violence, terrorism, and more. U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Ohio is no exception. While the entire nation has been impacted by the opioid epidemic, Ohio has been hit harder than almost any other state. Over the course of 1 year, from April 2022 to April 2023, more than 5,000 Ohioans lost their lives to drug overdoses. That number is shocking, 5,000 in 1 year. On average, every day, 14 Ohio families lose a loved one to drugs. The U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Ohio could, as we speak, be tackling this drug crisis with community stakeholders like the Toledo Metro Drug Task Force. Instead, her nomination has been languishing on the calendar here in the Senate for months because one senator, the junior senator from Ohio, has promised, I guess, the former President Donald Trump that he would do his best to get even with the Department of Justice for even considering holding Donald Trump responsible for his conduct. It would be laughable if it weren't so damn dangerous. Because Senator Vance is not just harming my state, and he's not just harming his own state. The precedent he is setting will undermine public safety across the entire nation for years to come. As I've stated before, the Senate has a long history of confirming U.S. attorneys by unanimous consent. We don't even have roll call votes. When it came time for the Trump U.S. attorneys, no votes were required. Democrats, in control for most of that period of time, said to the president and his administration, you pick the U.S. attorneys, that's your right as president. The junior senator from Ohio does not agree with that. Before President Biden took office, the last time the Senate required a roll call vote on a U.S. attorney was in 1975. At the beginning of a new presidential administration, it's customary for all the U.S. attorneys to resign en masse and for the new president to select their replacements. That's the ordinary course of business. But as we've learned in the Senate, you can change that if you want to, and you want to run the risk of not bringing someone new to fill a position that's that important. That's why during the Trump administration, 85 of President Trump's U.S. attorney nominees moved through the Judiciary Committee. Senate Democrats allowed Trump's nominees, every single one of them, to be confirmed by unanimous consent, many of whom we would not have chosen personally, but that was a tradition that we held to. But it would not have been realistic to force a floor time debate on every single one of those nominees and still expect 85 U.S. attorneys to be confirmed and on the job in a timely manner. That tradition and the logic behind it obviously escapes the junior senator from Ohio. So we respected our colleagues and we respected the need for Senate-confirmed leadership in U.S. attorneys' offices. The Democrats put public safety and the needs of law enforcement ahead of the obvious politics of the day. But now the senator from Ohio is setting an unfortunate standard. He's putting us on a path of requiring cloture and confirmation votes for every U.S. attorney nominee, something everyone here knows is not feasible. Does this sound reminiscent of another Republican strategy from another Republican senator in the state of Alabama? He held up, I believe, 400 military promotions for months at a time. He was angry about a new policy in the Department of Defense after the Dobbs decision. To protest that, he literally put a brick on 400 nominees for promotion in the U.S. military. Finally, 2 weeks ago, he relented. We still have 11 to take care of. But to think of the hardship caused those individuals and the fact that we didn't have leadership when we should have for our national security is an indication to me of how this strategy of just stop the train I want the world to get off is not a sensible one. So what will happen in the future when inevitably dozens of U.S. attorneys are left to function without Senate-confirmed leadership? Public safety will suffer, and we're setting a terrible precedent. To get angry with the administration and try to require a roll call and a vote, at least one, maybe two, on each nominee is just unnecessary, and it's not logical, and it doesn't follow the precedent of the Senate. All because one senator has decided that because Donald Trump is facing indictments and prosecution in various parts of the United States, he wants to protest by hurting the selection of U.S. attorneys in his own home state of Illinois and the state of his own home state of Ohio and the state of Illinois. We have before us two highly qualified nominees to lead their respective U.S. Attorney's office. Until we confirm them, law enforcement agencies in both Illinois and Ohio will be held back from doing their best to fight crime and to end our drug crisis in this country. When the senator from Ohio was asked why he was doing this and what his goal was, he was very explicit. I will hold all DOJ nominations. We will grind the Justice Department to a halt, quote unquote, June 13th this year. Well, I can tell you, we just had a hearing with as you know, as a member of the committee, with the director of the FBI, and he talked to us about the battles he's fighting, the terrorism threats across America since the October 7th event in Israel. And he sees these blinking lights, he says, in every direction of danger to the United States. Are we going to have the Department of Justice on the job with professionals doing the best they can, or are we going to let it grind to a halt? Grind to a halt. Those were his words. Well, I hope we have some common sense on this situation, and I hope we do it right now. I ask unanimous consent that a time be determined by the majority leader in consultation with the Republican leader. The Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nominations. Calendar number 314 and 315. 2 minutes for debate equally divided in the usual form on each nomination. Upon the use and yielding back of time, the Senate proceed to vote without intervening action or debate on the nominations in the order listed. Motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate. That no further motions be in order, that the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action, and the Senate then resume legislative session.
Is there objection?
Madam President.
Senator from Ohio.
Reserving the right to object, and with respect to my colleague from Illinois, my argument here is very simple, and it's this. The Department of Justice under Joe Biden and under Merrick Garland's leadership has become a weapon for political intimidation as opposed to an instrument to prosecute justice in this country. My colleague from Illinois says that Donald Trump has asked me to do this. He, of course, has no evidence for this fact, and I've never had a conversation with President Trump to this effect. What I have said publicly and privately, and to anyone who will listen, is that the Department of Justice should be about justice and not about politics. This hold policy, which covers 2 nominees right now, and maybe a third coming up to the Department of Justice, is simply to say that this cannot go on. We are a republic, not a banana republic. And so long as Merrick Garland prosecutes not just Donald Trump, but any number of political opponents, from Catholic fathers of 7 to parents protesting peacefully at their school board meetings, so long as the Department of Justice focuses on citizens exercising their rights rather than criminals who are violating the rights of others, I will continue to object, and I do object.
The objection is heard.
Madam President.
Senator from Illinois.
I keep hearing this argument over and over again, weaponizing the Department of Justice. His complaint is the Department of Justice has decided that Donald Trump, American citizen, should be held responsible for his own conduct. Why would he argue that any citizen in this country is above the law? I didn't choose that decision, choose to make that strategy or even support it publicly, but I can't argue with the decision by the Attorney General, nor the state of New York, nor the state of Atlanta, who believe that Donald Trump did things that he should be held accountable for. He will have his day in court like every American citizen. He should not be put in some saintly status that he can't be touched. And to think that in order to show my protest to any policy, I want to see the Department of Justice of the United States grind to a halt. Does the senator have any idea what he just said? To think that we would stop the court proceedings, we would stop the prosecutions, we would stop the war against drugs, we'd stop the war against terrorism, have them grind to a halt because I'm mad that the former president is being, in my mind, harassed by this administration. This is irresponsible conduct. It's dangerous conduct. And it's a terrible precedent to set in the Senate that we would say to any individual, you have the power to stop a nominee who's been found to be acceptable on a bipartisan basis through the Senate Judiciary Committee. You know as well as I do, these nominees come before the committee and both staffs, Democrat and Republican, tear through them to look for any flaws and any reason to stop the nominations. These two nominees in Ohio, his home state, and in Illinois both passed the test, the bipartisan test, and they were on their way to do a job for America and make it a safer place to live. And he stops them because he doesn't like the way Donald Trump is being treated. Is that a fact? I mean, he admits it on the floor of the Senate. It's hard to explain to the senator, he's new to the Senate, relatively new to the Senate, that some of the traditions in the Senate are worth keeping. The fact that we gave 85 U.S. attorney nominees to Donald Trump as Democrats and did it without a single record vote is an indication we were trying to help his administration do their job. Why won't the senator from Ohio let the Biden administration do their job and keep his own state safe? I yield the floor.